Is Asun joining us?
No, he's not.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you
Was
want
I,
to? I can text him if you want.
no, I know. I think he had mentioned he was interested, but if you're recording, you
All right.
can probably
Let me
just set
let me
him
text him and see.
recording as well. I
Yeah.
know he was on our clubhouse earlier this week. I saw his name pop up.
Okay. Yeah, because I know I had I had a call with some law students during that clubhouse. That's why I couldn't make it.
Yeah, you got a lot of late nights.
Yeah.
Seems like you're up and functioning pretty late.
Oh yeah, for sure. Never sleep. But yeah, going back to what you were saying.
I had a dinner with friends earlier this week, and I was trying to explain crypto and how it's changed. And one of the things that we reflected on is how discouraging it can be for people you consider and admire to get into crypto, because often the face of crypto are in like a polite way, like the sales bros who are really they speak in a lot of hyperbole and they're overly promotional and they tend to focus a lot on the gains and they're really speculative. And so those are people in my own personal life that I don't tend to trust quite as much in terms of what industry is substantive and real and has potential. And so we were just talking about that, and they had said to me, you're the first person whose opinion I trust who has gone into crypto, and everyone else seems to be kind of fluffy or a little bit more lacking substance, or maybe we just don't trust their gut instincts to the same degree. And so it's just interesting because as much as my life has changed in the last year and a half, their perceptions of crypto really haven't changed all that much. It's still what the average consumer sees, which is prices go up and people try and buy and everyone's looking to make a bunch of money. And some of the kind of more interesting mechanisms behind the scenes seem to be getting lost. So it's just interesting to hear from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah, and that's one thing. That's the one thing that I explain to like people that are new to blockchain that I'm trying to get into you know development and things like that. The way I explain it is that if people talk to you about crypto, I say if they mention a token, I say ask them what project is that backing.
Mm-hmm.
I said 95% of them can't give you the answer, right?
Yeah.
And I say that then you go kick it and scream it. I said, but also when people have this negative perception of crypto, I say compare it to stock market. Everyone supports the stock market, right? Most people. I say whenever you buy one stock, how do you know that you truly own that stock?
Mm-hmm.
Where's your certificate? Right? Where's
Yeah.
the proof? Right? But how is that compared to crypto, where it's on the blockchain that you purchased that? I said, that's the difference. I said, so if you ask me, crypto is actually more visible, more secure. You know you own that particular cryptocurrency.
Well, but then you
That's
can make
compared
the
to the
argument
market.
similarly, if you work through, I know, for example, I have some stock through ComputerShare. And so they hold my stock certificate on my behalf. And it's not the same, but it has some similarities to Coinbase, where if you have tokens in Coinbase, you don't have the keys, which would be, I think, the closest parallel. And so it's a little bit similar where, unless you take possession of that by transferring it into a hot or cold wallet that you have the keys for, uh, you don't have that same proof of ownership in that circumstance. Like it's a little bit more where the crypto is stored, it seems. Um, but I would also add too, I think one of the comments that was interesting to me this week was, I haven't seen any use cases in crypto that, will change the real world, will change the regular world. They're all sort of these new things. To which I kind of
Or you
say,
mean like social impact type things?
not just social impact, but like changing technology that the non-crypto world uses. So when you
Oh, I
think
see.
of like, banking, for example, there's been a lot of hype about banking and supply chain and those sorts of use cases when it comes to the potential impact of crypto, but not a lot of it has really been a reality so far,
Yeah.
at least to the average spectator. And so that was kind of the comment he was making. And I was like, I don't know if that's true though. I think it's, I can't remember the name of the company, but one of my college acquaintances went there. It was a centralized bank in the regular world that used the same concept that I have seen used in crypto, which is this idea of like pooling interest and like giving it away on like a lottery system or giving it away kind of in a an earning type capacity that's much bigger than a typical interest rate. And so I'd have to look up the particulars of that company, but I was like, that's a 100% a concept that originated in crypto and is now moving back to the centralized world. And time will tell whether or not it can compete in that way, in the sense that, it doesn't have, to my knowledge, because I tried to look it up, it doesn't have blockchain technology powering it. And so the question becomes like, can blockchain technology prove itself as the right way to execute on this use case or to fulfill this use
Right.
case?
That's where, because because I'm business, I am supply chain,
Yeah.
so that's what I talk about in a lot of these conferences of how blockchain's going. And that's what kind of directed me to Polkadot. Because I think that there's going to be a lot of use cases in the supply chain world where it's going to be applicable. Where you're going to need solutions like Moonbeam for smart contracts to, and pallets and things like that. So that's why I gravitated to Polkadot. And I think that we're going to bring in, so like our vision is to bring in supply chain students, business students, law school students to start developing out these applications. And I had a call last night with an individual within the healthcare space, where he's seeing a lot of things. And I think I see. So University of Maryville, we've partnered with them, and so one professor actually put transcripts on the blockchain with within his organization. So that was pretty cool. They're actually using it,
Oh, that's very cool.
So yeah, he's like, it's $5, who cares? I just want people to use it and adopt it. You pay $5, you get it in 10 seconds. You know,
Mhm.
so he's I think he had a call with Gartner a couple weeks ago, to kind of do a special on, or whatever, whatever y'all do in the marketing world on that. So yeah, his that solution is actually picking up, and we're trying to just get some blockchain education at Maryville. So
Um, I'm just going to send you, yeah, I can send it in this chat. So this is just so you have it, this is the company that I'm pretty sure is not run on blockchain, that I have a colleague, someone I went to high school or college with, went there.
Yada.
And like this,
Yoda or Yada? Yada or Yoda?
I think it's Yoda.
Okay, Yoda. Okay.
I'm assuming. I haven't tried to say it out loud before. And then I
Oh,
sent you the one which
I
is
said that.
the blockchain version that I'm most familiar with. And I can't say for sure which one came first, but I think that's an example of something that is a concept that I think probably originated in blockchain, and I'm not sure how you can execute on it in an FDIC insured type of savings bank scenario, but it's something
But
that I think would be
this
really
pull
interesting.
together, that's on the blockchain, right? Yeah. The pool and the second link, that's on the blockchain, right?
Oh, yeah. Pool Together is, I would say one of, or at least last year, it was one of the more popular DeFi platforms. So the second one is definitely built on blockchain. The first one, I'm not sure. I think I had messaged him and asked at first, and he
So
didn't.
what happened to pull together? It kind of just went by the wayside of all these DeFi projects coming up.
I don't know that anything negative happened to it. I haven't looked to see if they still have the same level of transactions and such.
Okay.
I just know I haven't heard about it in a while because people have been a little bit more focused on some of the other new up and comers from a DeFi perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Cool. Well, so I know I've been kind of monopolizing the time, but did you have like specific things you wanted me to talk through?
Yeah. So like I said, so you said that your manager said that everything is cool as long as he reviews it before he wants to review this recording, or he wants to review the actual article before it gets published.
I would like to read the article before it gets.
Okay.
I mean, he could review this, but I don't know that it would be terribly interesting to him. No, he was a little bit hesitant about the Purestake name, in the sense that he's like, I don't know what exactly this is going to be. So I think, certainly having him review it and then figure out if that's an appropriate uh, place to use the Purestake brand, I think would probably be the most important thing.
Yeah,
But
and
other,
like I said, yeah, and we could actually not even mention Purestake, and we're just gonna say that, I mean, we don't have to use your name, but we could put you on as well. You are going to be a co-author because it's your stuff, but with any of these journal articles, like if they know the people, they track down who the hell are even talking about
yeah,
on
I was
these
gonna
journal
say,
articles,
it's
right?
my,
They track down if they really want to. If they really want to figure it out, they'll figure it out,
yeah.
right? So So that's one thing to consider, and that's going to be just an easy edit or whatever. We mask a name and say, let's just call this person Katie.
Katie,
Agent K.
extra.
All right, so yeah, just going back to what you were talking about. Like I said, going back to what you were talking about with myself and Asun, that's exactly what I want. So like going back to how you left the industry, like what were the factors? What were your thoughts whenever you left the industry to come into the blockchain world, to a blockchain startup with no equity, and they're just giving you tokens that are worthless? Worthless at that point, you were receiving them, right?
Yeah. Well, so it didn't, like, the series of events wasn't exactly like that, in the sense that we do have some equity in the company as employees.
Okay.
But what does the company own? You know what I mean? So it's even similar to, if you look in the Web2 world, something like Red Hat, where they have focused on open source, but their whole business is built around like this consulting component. And so, even that consulting component, we have that to some degree with Purestake, but it's not exactly the same. But let me back up just to make sure I address your question. So I was, I've loved tech startups from the very beginning. I sort of fell into it right after college. I worked for a pretty small company that was making a shift from B2B to consumer, and so that a little bit got me hooked. And so I, was working at that company, and then following that, I worked at another company that had planned a spinoff, and that was the reason I joined. Planned a spinoff to focus on a developer-oriented product, and I loved that. That was the first time I had the ability to build a team under me and to really, build a brand and a message around something that I felt very strongly was needed. So I've always had kind of a passion for those sorts of things. And, I ended up at this company uh, that's really focused on the IT sector. And it was a little bit more traditional B2B. The commute was really long. And so there were a number of factors, but ultimately, the company had been trying to raise a Series B for a very long time. And there was a lot of internal, turmoil, I would say, around how the company should be led, and how it should be run, and who should be on the team from an executive perspective, in the sense that, there were a few people who came in and left very abruptly. And so there was just a lot of back and forth, and it was a very stressful time, which is unfortunate because I was getting married that year. And so I was really looking for something a little bit more, I wouldn't say stable, because I don't expect stability with startups, but a little more promising, I would say, like something that had real potential that I could feel, and that I could kind of see a future for. So I applied for one job, just one. And it seemed to check all the boxes for me, and that was Purestake. And so for me, when I applied, which was really at the nudging of one of my previous coworkers, who said to me, like, Katie, what the hell are you doing here? Like, go somewhere that's, on the up and up, get out of here. And so it was like sort of on a whim, at like 6 o'clock, while I was still at the office working, hey, let's just throw my hat in the ring for this one. And so it ended up working out, and I was really impressed with the team. I spoke to, I think, 3 people before I took the role, and everyone was incredibly smart. And most interestingly, they were very self-aware that they didn't know what the company was going to be doing in a year. And so that was interesting to me, because I had been coming from a company that, had stated in no uncertain terms exactly what they thought they should be doing, and then reverse direction, reverse direction, reverse direction. And so this approach to say, like, we know there's going to be potential here, we know there's going to be something big, we're actively trying to figure out what it is. But we're open to the idea that we haven't hit it yet. And so that was a really interesting approach to me. And of course, I love marketing to developers. I think they're often, kind of given not enough credit because people bill them as, being marketing averse or hating marketing, but really they just hate bad marketing. And don't we
Right.
all?
Right.
But even coming from, a previous work experience where it was selling security tools to developers that they could actually use, I can see where some of the distaste comes from a developer perspective, where, like, I don't know if you've met a lot of people in the security space. I know I had mentioned this a little bit when Asun was on the phone. They got some ego. And so
Right.
often it ends up with this dynamic of like developers building their sandcastle and then security people coming to kick it down. And so that creates a lot of friction. And I think that what ends up happening is marketers try to pander to them or try to talk down to them or overly simplify concepts that shouldn't be overly simplified. And so I've always loved marketing developers. I think, when I was joining Purestake, it sort of checked all the boxes from an intellectual perspective. It was, going to be certainly challenging to figure out where the company was going to go. And it was going to be very exciting for me to work with developers again. But there were two things that were a little bit of a question mark for me. The first was blockchain and cryptocurrency, which then and still now is still openly scoffed at in many ways. And then the second piece was, how is this company funded? I just came from a company that didn't know how they were going to get funded. So how does that work in this instance? And so, to touch on the first one, it was interesting that, people who I'd interviewed with, who I had a lot of respect for and were seemingly very intelligent, I had connections of connections with some of these people and I had heard good things. And so people whom I had a lot of respect for were in this space. And I think that in and of itself was really interesting because, we all saw the 2017 boom and then bust with crypto. But I think what a lot of people miss is that with each of these bull markets, not everyone leaves. Not all of the price doesn't go back down to the way it was, and a lot more people come in as the network as prices go up. And so, each time one of these happen, whether it's in like 2013 or 2017 or 2021, more people enter the space, and it becomes, kind of more. I don't want to say common, but it becomes like, you attract different people. And I think we're starting to get to the stage where it's not just technologists, it's not just economists, it's not just, salespeople who are, maybe giving a little more of a pitch than they should on the technology. It seems that there are other people starting to recognize the potential here. And the more marketers we get, the more ecosystem development teams we get for community building and content and developer relations and explaining some of this technology, like the more of those kinds of people who come in, I think the better for everyone. So, once I got past the mental hurdle of like blockchain, okay, which my previous VC kind of, when he heard I was going to a blockchain company, was like, oh no, I wish I had known because I could have prevented her from making that mistake.
Right.
Which obviously I don't now see as a mistake, but it still has that sort of negative perception. But then the piece I think that you probably want to focus the most on is this funding piece. So when I was interviewing with Purestake, and I did talk a little bit about what my compensation would include, it was a little bit standard in the sense of, okay, so there's some salary component, and then there's some option component, and that's pretty standard, I think, for most startups. It's something that I'm familiar with. But usually you try and figure out, what your options are as a percentage of kind of the total pie, the total number of shares available, which is based on investment received so far, right? So if you're early in the door, you expect a bigger chunk of the pie than if you're right before, an IPO or something like that, where you would get a much smaller slice of the pie. And so, then the conversation wound to like, well, what does Purestake have for investment? And that was, I think, the part that really threw me through a loop. And so, without going too much into detail, the company had some small amount of investment. It had been in business for about 6 months at that point, but it had some small amount of investment to pay for kind of the initial salaries of the first few employees. from, I think, private individuals largely. So I don't know that I can go into detail on those, but
That's fine.
they had some assets on the books, right? Because like humans, companies can also buy crypto. And so the company had a number of these assets, which I'm not sure to the degree to which they were granted or purchased or whatever, but there was a number of these assets on the books. And so they kind of told me roughly what the number was and how much that equated to in USD at the time. But if you look up this asset, it was on the decline, right? Because we were in 2019 and it was, the bull run had long since ended.
Mhm.
And it was what people refer to as the crypto winter. And
Right.
so that's when things, dried up. But often, I think anecdotally, people refer to these times as like, I don't want to say house cleaning, but a little bit of, the people who stick around are the ones who really believe in something. And you end up with maybe fewer teams, but really high quality teams who stick around during these
Right.
periods and are able to survive because they've figured out a way to fund themselves and so forth. Um, so I think that was really kind of the most difficult piece for me is, okay, well, I've heard that there's this like crypto funding that the company has. And, right now it's worth X, but the number is dropping pretty precipitously. Do we think it's going to be the same number in a month or 2 months or whatever? And so, ultimately I took the weekend to think about it. And I kind of ended up deciding, the people who are going to be my new colleagues, the people who I now work with and have worked with since, they're sharp. And it's one of those things where, like, yes, you don't want to just kind of believe anything that anyone tells you, and you want to be a little bit discerning when you're trying to figure out if an opportunity is right, especially for me in my stage of my career. Like, I don't want to go to a company that I'm not going to be able to have some longevity with and to help grow. But ultimately, it had to come down to, the people who I would be working with are far smarter than I am, and not just in a like technological way. There's again, like, there's something here. There's an opportunity, and maybe if I don't understand it, I can take a leap. I can say, you know what, this person seems to have some sort of real substance, real knowledge that leads him to believe that this will be sufficient to get us through. And also, like, we didn't know what we were going to be ultimately focusing on from a business perspective. We had started with kind of like infrastructure services to support a blockchain. We had also started with um, API services for developers and a few other things. But, even as I was joining, they were actively evaluating other blockchains to support. And that's ultimately where we found some sort of traction, which I can talk to after this, but I know I've been talking for a really long time. So I'll make sure you have time
Oh,
to ask
please do.
questions or
Okay.
clarify.
Oh, you have a hard stop at 11?
I don't know that I do. Let me just check my calendar.
Because I'm building my questions up now.
I don't have a hard stop, so I can keep going
Okay.
until
Keep going about so back up on what you were talking about previously.
To which part
The where you stopped to say you're gonna expand on.
I was going to say, so I started at Purestake in August of 2019, which is just about a year and a half ago. I think in like maybe September, we decided as an organization, but also Derek, our CEO, decided to expand to Polkadot. And that was based on a number of things, but largely, again, it is a mix of like very compelling technology. A lot of really smart people seem to be building this chain, and not just smart as in tech smart, which is different than people who can really see an opportunity and understand how to build technology to meet that opportunity. And I say that's different because I've worked in an organization before where the CTO, basically had like an agenda that he would dictate down, and it led to technology that just wasn't useful in the market. Like, it was maybe really cool from a philosophical perspective, but it didn't actually, like, it was security tool, when you ran it against the average developer's code, like it didn't produce results because it found these really cool issues that were not the most common issues. And so I've seen where technology can run astray and run afoul of what reality dictates is the need. So the team building Polkadot was very, very intelligent. But I think as importantly, most of the teams building on Polkadot at that stage were also very important and very smart. And so those things I think are different because now, a year and a half on, we know that Polkadot is already, I think, the #2 blockchain in terms of developers building on top of it. And that comes out of nowhere because Polkadot launched a year ago. And I can send you the report. It's in an Electric Capital report.
Yeah,
But
please send that. Yeah, so
it's an amazing development, I think, when you look at, how quickly and how recently they joined the market and how they've been able to get so much traction from teams that are building on them in earnest. And, I'm certainly not in any position to speculate on price, but if you look at their market cap compared to other projects that have been around much, much longer and maybe even have more buzz associated with them, they're doing really quite well for, again, like they haven't even been launched a year yet.
right.
So it was sort of a mix of factors, but ultimately, there just seemed to be a big opportunity. There was a new ecosystem developing. And so we wanted to do something in Polkadot. And so the strategy that Derek, our CEO, laid out was to get involved with the Parity team any way we could and to show that we knew what we were doing. And so we kicked off 2 Kusama validators, I believe in October or November of 2019. And I mean, I could go back and get the exact date, but that's important because, we were nobodies. We had only been founded that year. We had a lot of really smart DevOps people, and the folks internally know how to build like solid infrastructure. And that's what we had done for Algorand previously, and that's what we were doing for Polkadot. So that's sort of where we started. And over time, by showing that like we were asking really smart questions, we were logging bugs that other people weren't able to find. We were able to update our validator way faster than anyone else. And, of course, had very little downtime, like just kind of your typical success metrics. I think we were able to develop some rapport with the Parity team, and things sort of accelerated from there. So in about December of 2019, it became very clear that there was an opportunity to build our own smart contract platform on Polkadot. And that was a number of things. It was a little bit of an identification of this need that there was, again, like no way to take existing smart contracts and deploy them to a new blockchain without a ton of headache, right? You've got to hire a new team that knows this obscure language. And if you've ever talked to Rust developers, half of them are very anti-blockchain. And it irritates them that it's like the de facto language of blockchain because many of them are kind of opposed to it from a philosophical perspective. So there's very few of these developers, and there's even fewer who are open or want to pursue blockchain as their career path. But I think beyond that, like hiring a new team, completely reprogramming something that you've had successfully running for many years, like it's a very daunting and kind of obnoxious task. And so even today, you can see platforms that are sort of refusing to do that. And instead they're paying or offering grants to people who, can kind of do it for them so they don't have to deal with the headache of what exactly that entails. But it seemed like there was an opportunity to help projects get onto these new blockchains that have a lot of promise, but otherwise would be a pretty significant investment of time in order to get on. And I won't go too much into the technology of Polkadot, but the long and short of it is like, if you want to build directly on Polkadot, you have to build a parachain or a parathread. And that's something to note because it's not just programming in Rust. It's not just that as the difficulty, but you also have to figure out, well, what's your governance system? What's your token? What is, your how are you going to audit this code and prepare this code for launch? How are you going to elect a council? What are they going to be in control of? Who's going to manage all of these things? Are you going to have 2 deployments to Kusama and to Polkadot? It becomes quite intensive. And so in addition to kind of the logistical pieces of removing, having to re-platform basically, you've also removed some of the complexities that come with building an entirely new blockchain. And so a lot of teams maybe aren't interested in that, or they might be interested in it down the road, but don't want to start there. And so it became pretty evident that there was an opportunity here with Moonbeam. And so we ended up, I think, formally announcing the project in April of 2020, after we had been working on it for some time and really tried to figure out exactly what this would be. And since then, we've been working on it kind of in full force. We've raised 2 funding rounds, and we have since published token allocation information. And so something that's important to note is, like, it is publicly accessible that 10% of the total tokens on the Moonbeam network is going to the team members. And that in and of itself was a decision, right? Because there's some networks that are taking 20% or 30%. The 30% ones are usually, called out for being a little bit too greedy. But, what's the right amount to take for the team members? And then, of course, there's politics, behind the scenes of how to distribute that within the team members. But then there's also the second network in Polkadot, which also makes things complex, which is on Kusama. And so that has a whole new token, right? Because if you're another parachain, you need another token. And so it becomes quite complex. But sort of to what you had asked at the beginning, like, no, there were no tokens when I first started at Purestake. That actually, Derek had talked about potentially having a token someday. We just had to figure out what it would be for. And that was the most intimidating thing in the world, right? Like, oh, I don't know if I'm comfortable with figuring out how to launch a token. Like, we have to hire a bunch of lawyers and figure out how to navigate that from a legal perspective in the US. And like, are we even allowed to touch that or manage that? Like, it needs to be totally in someone else's hands. And so there's certainly an intimidation factor that I kind of gradually got over as I started to understand what exactly this entailed. And it's partially, becoming more comfortable with things over time, but it's also partially getting more information about how this really will work. So I'll just note that, like, today, we have ultimately made the decision that the team will get 10% of the initial tokens for Glimmer and 0% of the tokens for River. And that's the Kusama deployment. That is different than what other parachains are doing. There are parachains I've seen that are taking, tokens for the team on both ends. There's parachains I've seen that are taking, 20, 30% of the tokens for themselves. And so it's important to highlight that because, even though, yes, the team members are getting some sort of rewards for this founding, it really was not an easy decision at any step of the way. And so that wasn't even really finalized until mid-year or something last year. And when we took on the first investment, which was September, when we announced it, September 2020, that was when we started to internally have some more insight into what the token allocation could be or would be. And then we were able to make that information public and finalized as of January 2021. So I mean, I can send you the links to look at that, but
please do that, because we're trying to figure that out on our end as well.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting too if you look at ours and then kind of compare what other people are doing. And again, like, you can, I'm sure you're familiar with most of the top parachains in the Polkadot ecosystem, but even outside of the Polkadot ecosystem, to look what people have done. But it becomes pretty complex then, right? Because again, let's go back to this dinner that I had earlier this week with non-crypto people. They'll ask questions like, well, how is the company valued? How do you determine what the value of Purestake is? And it's not by this token. It's not by any sort of real measurable metric that matters all that much. Like, there will always be some value to Purestake. Purestake is a number of products and a number of services that are really important. But it's almost like a little bit irrelevant once you have this token component, which sort of takes on a life of its own and it's a value of its own. So when I think now about compensation and what's important to me, there's these Purestake options, which will potentially someday have some value. There's day-to-day like cash compensation, which will always have value for me as I have to pay for a mortgage and things. And then there's this crypto thing, which to me seems like it has a more real and near-term value. And I say that because, like, if you've dealt with startup stock options in the past, you have to have a buyer to get rid of them, right? You have to exercise the options if you've left the company, or if the company is acquired, you can just usually cash in the options themselves for some amount of cash. But with crypto, even though we can't directly access it in the sense that, for our own security and safety, it's kind of we don't have direct crypto assets. We have ownership of a company, which then holds the assets. Someday, pretty soon, it seems like we'll be able to track that value in a way that most startups aren't able to until they, go public or have some other kind of visible number attached to it. We'll be able to have that probably sooner and in a more real way. But I've cautioned my team, even like you got to watch out for it, because it can be beautiful and it can be awful when you have some number attached to the project that you're building. So I think of, again, like when we first started the project that was, dropping in terms of price, and the effect that has on morale. Like it's through it's nothing that their team had done per se, in the sense of, everyone internally at that project was also super smart, was doing the right things, was concentrating on growing the network and integrations and all of the pieces that you look for in a smart and capable team. But, it still kind of takes a bit of a morale hit when you see, the tokens that you own kind of drop that quickly. And it's since, very much rebounded. But I think to those kinds of instances, and I've cautioned my team, like, yes, it can be lovely if, we know that there's some value to these things that we will at some future date have access to or own. But it can also be negative. Like if you're working really, really hard nights and weekends trying to get this thing out the door, and you see numbers drop and drop and drop, it does have an effect on what you're doing. And so you just have to be careful and be aware of that, and plan on riding out kind of these crypto winters, because even though, again, we're still in a bit of a bull run and Bitcoin is hitting an all-time high, it seems like every other week,
right?
You still have to be aware that these things will likely end, and it will go back down, maybe not to its pre-bull run levels, but it will decline at some point. And you just have to be ready that, you can wait it out. And it might be a year, it might be 2 years. It's a little bit difficult to know, but there's also those sorts of components that maybe people at public companies are very used to dealing with, but because I've never been in a public company, that's actually something pretty new for me. So I'll stop talking there. I feel like I've been talking your ear off.
No, please keep going. This is good stuff. Anything else you can share? Because this is phenomenal.
The only other thing that I'll make as a kind of a broad comment. So I mentioned, so once Moonbeam launches, I won't directly own any crypto. I will own kind of ownership in a fund. And I don't know how much of that,
like a foundation type thing.
Sorry?
It's like the Moonbeam Foundation or something like that.
Sort of. Like we don't have ownership in the foundation itself, but I'm not even sure how much of this stuff we can make public anyway, but I'll just.
All right, this is off record, so let me stop recording.
Yeah, well, that's what I would have to check with Stefan what we can say, but basically there's different funds set up. So the employees have like a pool of tokens, but we can't directly own the tokens in case in some future state, the US government says, well, no, you weren't supposed to do this that way, and we want it done this way. It's sort of an effort to protect ourselves in case like regulations come out now that retroactively impact these tokens. So it's just a good security measure for companies building in the US to have anyway, because regulation here is not so much undefined as like ridiculously complex, and there's way too many.
But this regulation piece can be added, right? So I think that's going to be a very important piece to your views on regulation.
Yeah, well, so the thing is, I'm not an expert in regulation, so I almost would defer to maybe someone who has a little bit more familiarity with how to navigate that. Okay. But I do know, like, we're not scared of what the regulations are today, because whatever they are, like, we can figure it out. We've got a whole team of lawyers. We're more scared about what the regulation could or will be, right? Because that can often impact what you're doing today. So as sort of a protection.
So you have crypto lawyers?
What are crypto lawyers? Lawyers.
Crypto lawyers.
Oh yeah. I forget the name of the, we have US lawyers and Singapore lawyers, because the Moonbeam Foundation is a Singapore entity. Well, I should say they have Singapore lawyers, but yeah, crypto. Well, I know we talked about earlier, Tanya Evans. She is a crypto lawyer. That's kind of like where she's made a name for herself. So at any rate, we have basically ownership in this fund, and the fund owns tokens, but we don't directly own tokens. So if those things are worth a lot, then we have some percentage of them. If they're worth nothing, we still have the same percentage of them. But at some future date, when like the U.S. government maybe issues kind of more guidance on whether or not those are things that we as U.S. citizens can hold, that's when we would consider being able to hold them directly. But as just a precaution and safety for ourselves, we have it a little bit separated. So no one directly at launch will have, no one who works for Moonbeam will have tokens that they can spend, which is awkward if you think about it.
Why did I not even think about this? She's a sister. I didn't even. That's crazy. Anyway.
Well, that's what I mentioned her last time because
I know. I didn't look her up though. I didn't LinkedIn stalk her. I just did it.
I know she has her own website too. But I guess she knows someone that I know. So I have a mutual acquaintance, but I haven't actually been able to speak with her.
Okay.
But yeah, the crypto law is a whole discipline that's emerging very quickly.
Of course. Oh, she's from Carlisle. Interesting.
What was that last part?
She's from Carlisle. She's like maybe an hour. Well, now she's like 2 hours from me. That's not far.
Yeah, I think I mentioned to you she was also recently on Laura Shin, which I might have open.
Yeah, the podcast.
Yeah, it was NFTs, so it doesn't directly pertain to this conversation, but I know it was nice to see someone who I'd heard of in the blockchain space pop up on Laura Shin. But cool. Well, so yeah, so there's some precautions like every company that's based out of the US can take, but I did also want to just talk about how much it sucks to see the US sort of in league with all of these other countries in terms of not being able to participate in some of these early sales or that kind of thing. So for example, when we're talking about a public sale, which the Moonbeam Foundation will run later this year, which is not based in the US, but that's by design so that US citizens can't participate and no US citizen will be running the sale. And so it's really disappointing when you see like the list of banned countries and it's like the United States followed by like Syria,
Akala, you couldn't even deal with Akala on theirs.
What about Akala?
Whenever I was trying to sign up for Akala this week, you can't participate in Akala's things.
Yeah, it's the US. They're unfortunately not designed for these kinds of things in what they see, what I believe the SEC sees as a way to protect citizens from losing a bunch of money or falling victim to scams.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, like usually if it's a scam, they just let whoever buy, they let whoever send tokens, versus the more legitimate companies, of course, want to be in line with
them down, right? Like Akala's doing.
Yeah, I think you'll find that most reputable companies will have the same restrictions.
So it's kind of like you have to. So if you do an offering, kind of like what Akala's doing, like you have to like register in Singapore.
There's actually a number of countries that are, I don't want to say safe havens.
No, not really only in Singapore, but outside of the US pretty much.
Correct. There's a couple countries that have distinguished themselves by coming up with like paths for people to do that, right? So in the US, as complicated as it may be, there is a path to creating a banking charter if you want to create a banking charter. And so outside of the US, there are countries that have designed a way for crypto companies to build a foundation, which is a third-party separate governance entity, which actually holds and has some access to tokens. Whereas Purestake, which is the technology arm, all we do is build code. And so there's some countries that have distinguished themselves. I know Switzerland is very, very popular. I believe the Web3 team, the Web3 Foundation, which controls the tokens from Polkadot, they are based in Zug, Switzerland. I think there's actually a number of companies based in Switzerland that are on the foundation side, but Singapore is one of the other ones. And there's a number of other countries as well. I just can't remember each of them.
Liechtenstein, I had a call it with a guy from Liechtenstein. They do a lot of stuff.
It's interesting. It's a good opportunity, if you're trying to, because it's not that people don't want to comply. It's that it's very difficult to find, especially in the US, find all of the parties that need to participate in order to obtain compliance. But then, you know, even in other countries, like just give people a path to doing this correctly and make that path easier, and people will do it. And I think that's what is sort of another thing that I always try and message really carefully when I'm speaking to non-crypto people, is they sort of jump to conclusions about like skirting US law and, you know, operating outside of the country and all of that. But it's like any income we have, we pull back into the US and we report and pay taxes on it like any other company.
Mhm.
It's just that, you know, we have to protect ourselves from what the SEC could decide. And unfortunately, we're still 10 years after the launch of Bitcoin in this regulatory nightmare where there's not a lot of paths for companies like ours to exist in the US. And it's really unfortunate because, of course, you know,
This is going to be, yeah, that's going to be gold for people, you know, but yeah, because it's a big mystery. So yeah, all right. I'll have to talk about something off after, because yeah, because I'm thinking about, you know, a foundation, you know, and you know, would it make sense to go ahead and create a foundation like in Singapore if you're going to go the token route, you know?
yeah, I mean, I think it depends too what it's for. And I can't probably go into too much detail, but like we've seen, you know, now a number of companies have structured their foundation and their Inc., which is like the technology arm. They've structured it this way. And so we've seen what we believe works and what we think maybe would be less successful. And I say that as in, you know, we've worked quite closely with Algorand. Algorand Inc., the technology arm, is based out of the US. Algorand Foundation is not. I actually don't know where they might be a Swiss foundation as well. I'm not positive. And then similarly, we've worked, of course, quite closely with the Web3 Foundation, which is definitely based out of Zug, Switzerland, and then the Parity Inc. technology team, which is based out of Berlin. And so it's really interesting for me to see what seems to work well and what seems to work less well, because of course these companies, you know, had a head start. They've been around longer than we have. So we're sort of trying to glean what we think a successful foundation relationship with an Inc. looks like, while also maintaining all of the separation that we need to like objectively be able to say, you know, no one at the Inc. can control the tokens or manipulate the token value or anything like that, because that of course is the ultimate goal. It needs to be decentralized enough that there's nothing I personally can do to make it go up or down.
Right, right. Yeah, excellent. All right. Anything else before I get my questions?
I don't think so. I feel like I've given you my whole life story now.
I think there's some that's left. I think there's some things
Really?
that you left out.
Uh,
So so did you assist in like the white paper for Moonbeam?
so we actually didn't do a white paper.
Okay.
Um, and that was sort of a bigger decision. So I would say I participated in the editing, but most of it came from Derek, our CEO. It was really his brainchild. And so, yes, in the sense of he bounced ideas off of us over lunch and things like that when we were actually able to meet in person. But I would also say I was so new to the space that I'm sure I was pretty useless in the sense of like, you know, I'd started in August and we had started putting together, Derek had started putting together the first version of what is an internal white paper. So we sort of have one internally, but it's not published on the website or anything. He started working on that on, I think, December 2019. So it was really like his pet project in many ways. And he got tons and tons and tons of feedback from external parties on that, but that wasn't something that I was overly involved in other than like in a review and comment kind of capacity.
Okay. So you said you're very new to the space. So how did you get up to speed in this whole blockchain space?
Um, that's like the one thing I feel like I was very well trained for, in the sense that I've sort of referred to myself jokingly as a marketing chameleon, because I don't know what it is, but every time I take a new role, it's in a new industry. And so for me, having to get up to speed on a new technology, a new landscape, a new set of customers, a new set of way of selling things is sort of status quo. Like I do that every time. And so I give that example as in like my first company out of school, was a visual effects software company. So we were selling to artists who work for ILM and who work for broadcast companies like NBC and CBS. So we had kind of this talented group of people who purchased our software and did amazing things with it, which was really fun, by the way. But I was still on the software side, right? It was still tech. And then sort of from there, I went to, focus on developers, which is where I figured out that marketing to developers is something I really like. And I was dealing with both developers and security people because we were making security tools for developers. And so that was a whole new industry. I had to learn tons and tons of security terms that have since left my brain. But for example, there's something called an OWASP top 10, which is like the Open Web Application Security Project. But it's basically like the top 10 vulnerabilities that occur over and over and over and over. And they don't change, by the way. It's the same issues, the same vulnerabilities that happen continuously across pretty much any exploitation that you can think of. The only changes to the list over the years are like combining some of them to be one item instead of two so they can add more, which is pretty absurd. But at any rate, I had to learn that. I had to learn how software development works. I had to figure out, what some of these kind of in the weeds topics are. So for example, one of the courses we had was around OAuth, which is an authentication protocol, right? So if you log into something using another application's login, Facebook is a great example, or Google, it's authenticated in some way with another third-party service. And so they usually use two protocols, either OAuth or SAML. And so talking about those things was something the security people loved and loved and loved. From a developer perspective, it took me a while to get it, but I was just sitting there and you're listening to these security people talk at no end about the benefits of using OAuth versus using SAML. And it's just like, don't get me wrong, does this matter? And they kind of gave me this puzzled look. And I was like, if you want to use Facebook authentication, you have to use what they use. You don't get to pick OAuth or SAML. Like, why are we having this conversation? If you want to use Facebook authentication on your app, you have to use what Facebook already picked. So like the only people who are having this level of conversation are Facebook and Google and some of these really high level proliferate or widely proliferated services. GitHub, I think, does the same. And so it's one of those things where it's like the switch went on where it's like, we're having a conversation that's totally irrelevant to our audience. Why? This is a waste of our time. And so trying to make those sorts of leaps to not just understand the technology, but kind of like parse things and analyze it and realize that, you're talking shop. This is great. Not super relevant for the people we're trying to talk to. That I think was a really interesting turning point for me. And so again, like I had a bunch of these kinds of experiences where new industry, new audience, new tools, new tech, new terms, new acronyms, everyone in their acronyms. And so coming to blockchain, that part wasn't different. What I think is most different is that there's no one discipline that I feel like I will ever be able to master in crypto. We're on the technology side. I don't think I will ever be an expert or certainly even particularly competent in the economics of crypto or in the kind of governance aspects of crypto. So there's a lot of people who have really strong opinions about kind of these libertarian viewpoints when it comes to the way that individuals should or should not be governed and how much, the US government themselves, how much control they should have over a person's assets and a person's possessions in general. And those are things that I think are really interesting conversation points, but I don't think they're conversations that I will ever be all that ingrained in. I do tend to lean toward this technology side, which I am both more familiar with, but I also tend to enjoy more, right? Like all of these conversations are interesting, but show me what people are doing with it. Show me how people's lives are going to change for the better, not in theory, but in practice. Like I want to see the use, I want to see the applications. And so I do tend to lean more toward that side of the crypto coin. And that's something that I think does become really intimidating for new entrants to the space, is that, there's brilliant people from all walks of life. They're brilliant in different ways. And they all bring something really unique and interesting to the ecosystem. And some people are great at all of it. Like I will 100% say that our CEO just gets a lot of these pieces in a way that I kind of can only really care and understand a fraction of it. But I think it's really tough for people to hear about even token allocations and understanding, okay, well, how do the tokenomics of a coin, of a token, affect our future? So, you know, we have this KSM thing that's happening right now. So Kusama, all of these tokens are about to be locked, not all of them, but a good percentage of KSM tokens are about to be locked in a crowd loan. Because we're doing a crowd loan. Akala, as you mentioned, is doing a crowd loan. There's a number of other companies in this space who are planning to participate in this crowd loan process. And so there will be people who have some number of KSM that will need to be locked for a period of time. So you think about how that dynamic then shapes and impacts, you know, the circulation of Kusama and all of those things. And it's certainly, again, like not a thing I'm an expert in, but it's certainly an interesting conversation to have. And there are people who are experts who can have those conversations, and they're just a little bit separate from like my little bubble of expertise that I'm starting to build.
Interesting. So based on how on what you talked about just mentioned, how does that translate to like an investor? You know, you're going to see a lot of organizations looking to get funding in the coming months. I was about to say coming years, in the coming months, right? So if they approach an investor and an investor says, "Oh yeah, I heard of blockchain. Oh yeah, I heard of Bitcoin. Oh yeah, I heard of Ethereum, but I don't get it." Right? What do they look for in these organizations, and how do they get up to speed in these things? Because they're not going to have access to the people that you had. You know, they're not going to have access to the developers. I think that's the biggest question, and that's going to be the people who read this article.
So for me, there's two major shifts that have to happen, and those are both after a person or a VC or whoever it is gets up to date on the projects. I think the VCs that I think in my mind are interesting. They have an opinion about the future of the space. And I say it that way because it's a little bit more than just understanding the technology. And often some of these people don't always understand the technology, but it is about understanding like where you think this industry is going to go. And so naturally, we've worked with investors who believe in multi-chain, believe that, you know, there will be a space and time in the future where applications that are built on top of Ethereum also have a deployment to Moonbeam on Polkadot, and also have a deployment to some of these other chains. And it will be much less like one winner takes all. And it will be much less about these layer 2 workarounds to make Ethereum work. And it will, you know, not necessarily be about Ethereum 2.0. I think Ethereum 2.0 is going to make some very interesting changes to the space, but that's not going to be kind of what dictates the future per se. That's going to be like a little bit of a catch up. So the ones that we've worked with believe in this multi-chain vision. And so we subscribe to that personally. We think that, you know, Polkadot is going to be a leader. Ethereum will be a leader. Bitcoin, of course, as a currency will continue to be a leader, even though smart contracts aren't really much of a thing. And there will probably be others. There will probably be new ones that emerge that aren't one of these ones that I've mentioned. There will probably be some that exist today that will gain some prominence. But we just don't see it as like one technology to rule them all. And I think that that proves true if you think of any technology in the past. Like, it's not just Windows, it's not just iOS, it's not just Linux. You know, there's a number of operating systems that each work differently. And they each specialize in different kinds of use cases. And we see that same kind of concept to hold true for blockchain. But then, so that's kind of, I think, like the number one thing is this opinion, not just an understanding of the technology, but this opinion. Mm-hmm. And the second piece is knowing what value you bring as an investor. And that is super different from the way that at least I've seen some VCs behave in the past. And I've been fortunate enough to work with a VC based out of here in Boston, who is much more proactive and more involved about what can we do for you? Can we make some introductions? Can we get you involved in XYZ program? Can we help promote this for you? So I have worked with VCs who do have that sort of philosophy, but I've also worked with a lot of VCs who don't, who say, here's your check. Come back when you have something to show. And otherwise, we'll just see you once a quarter with the world's most stressful meeting. And that's how a lot of people approach it. So, I think that some VCs today who don't deal in blockchain will be well positioned to make the transition to crypto or to involve crypto as part of their portfolio, and some will be less well positioned. And that's really because you, especially now in a bull market, you don't have the ability to walk in, throw some weight around with your like brilliant name, and you don't have the ability to dictate terms with something like preferred stock, which is often, what VCs fight for is, I want to be paid out first. Instead, you get tokens like anybody else. And so if you're going to be one of the many, many firms that is going to purchase these tokens, what makes you more valuable as a token holder than someone else?
Right.
And you look at dynamics, like there's some tokens that launch that give everything away to the community. And they say, I want to have as many individuals own this token as humanly possible. And then on the flip side, there's a lot of organizations that veer more toward institutional investors. I want to have kind of meaningful, big relationships with notable firms. And we personally have fallen somewhere in between. We didn't allow any one investor to purchase all that much in terms of tokens, because we've seen how like these big whales,
right, sling and dump.
We've seen how like having them hold tokens and have so much power can have a negative effect on the market. And I use the example of Polkadot. We do still have validators there, but there's so many really big investors who then create their own validators and stake with themselves that it becomes really tough to even get in the validator set. So like we're not a small fry, right? We're an established validator with a great track record. We have I think we had the most number of stakers on Kusama in terms of quantity, like the number of individuals staking with us. And so, with that kind of reputation, how can we not even get in the door? And so those sorts of things I think are really, really tough. But yeah, for VCs, it ultimately comes down to like, do you know enough about the technology? And then do you have an opinion on where it will go as an industry? And if you can find a way to fill your portfolio with companies that will help that vision become a reality, I think that sort of, I don't want to say theming, but like that sort of conviction in what you believe lends well to helping all those companies get there, which of course is the second component. Like, what can you do for these companies? And so, for example, we most recently announced a $6 million strategic round, which is the last round prior to a future public sale that will be run by the Moonbeam.
You said million or billion?
Million.
Okay. Just want to make sure I heard that correctly.
Which is a pretty, I would say, like, respectable number in the sense of we weren't trying to, we've seen companies raise tons and tons and tons of money at these super high valuations and then have a really hard time launching because, maybe they raised more at a higher valuation than it really turns out it was worth. So I think we were pretty conservative with that. And so when you look at our investors, I mean, everyone who participated in the first one also participated in the second round, but we have investors like Coin Fund, who is a very well-established VC, and Jake Bruckman, who's one of the founders there, is very prominent and knowledgeable about the space. So he's very well positioned to help us navigate this process as we look to launch. And then sort of kind of secondarily, you see Binance Labs and you see Coinbase. And those are obviously like very well-established exchanges. And while of course they cannot commit to in any way listing us at any point in time because of this investment, they can certainly help us navigate that process, right? Because as an exchange, they have a lot of familiarity with what the listing process will look like in the future. And so if you just look at those kinds of examples, you can see how when we call this a strategic round, we really meant it was a strategic round. We're trying to surround ourselves with people who not only have insight and kind of opinions as well as expertise, but we've also really tried to surround ourselves with people who have some utility for us as we look to launch, can actually help us get things done. And that becomes really tough when you're looking at only a community round, for example, only going to individuals who maybe can tweet about you, but can't help you get listed on reputable exchanges, and navigate that like legal and compliance process. So there's certainly some shifts that need to happen. I do think some traditional VCs are better positioned than others. And like I've mentioned, like I had the happy opportunity to work with a VC based out here out of Boston who did take that approach to be a little bit more centered around this this like collaborative sort of approach to investment. But I don't know that everyone thinks that way, and I don't know that everyone has made that leap.
No, but did that BC have crypto experience in crypto?
I do not believe they've done anything in crypto today. They are more technology focused. So I think like biotech, as well as infrastructure and just IT services.
Okay. Okay. So my wife just came in with my daughter, so my fault. So I think so based on what we discussed, for you, I think the biggest thing for you to go into this space was your passion for the technology industry. Would you say that would be fair? You know, for someone trying to go into this space, and would you say that for a VC, from a VC perspective, do you think that they have to act, because like Mark Cuban, Mark Cuban's doing interviews every single day, but Mark Cuban's passionate about technology. He's passionate about he's a visionary, right?
Yeah.
So he sees that. So what do you think, people should look for? Like I said, if they're brand new, like, do they have to have the passion? They have to have the buy-in to take a leap for a startup. Does
Yes,
that make sense?
I think that anytime you don't have the passion for a startup, it makes you much less able to weather some of these storms that you may experience. But
Yeah.
I would say that your first phrasing was probably more close to how I feel the technology industry, because the technology itself, I'm never going to, look at code or look at, the technology architecture and fall in love with it. And that's actually a question that I absolutely despise in the crypto industry, which is, when did you fall down the rabbit hole? Tell me when you fell down the rabbit hole. And I dislike it because I personally will never be in a position where I just look at the tech and that's what makes me fall in love with something. I much more am excited about innovation, and I say innovation not in like a grandiose sense, but like in a more pragmatic, practical sense. Like, how is this going to be changing things in the next 5 years rather than in the next 20? And it sort of stems from, again, my first experience out of college, where I worked on this visual effects software that was really interesting, and I loved the people we were marketing to, and we started the shift to consumer. And not only was this kind of during the time of like Instagram for video and like all of these video services launching on Facebook and sort of taking advantage of people clicking on things to unknowingly subscribe to a service. But it was also during this time where, I was just starting to get into user research and understanding how individuals who could have been in our market feel about these sorts of tools. And there was a huge disconnect between what we were building and what people said they wanted. And it was one of those things that caused a lot of inner turmoil, I think, and the company did end up shifting because it was just very clear that the market didn't want what we were producing. But it also made me a little jaded. And I was very much less inclined to work on a project that was like a social app or something like that. And I say social as in social media, not necessarily social change. I didn't want to work on something so frivolous and superficial. And
Right.
so that was really where, like, after that, I kind of pivoted to the security space, which, there's a new hack happening every day, including Facebook. That has a real practical value. And again, with like IT and even more recently with Purestake, I think blockchain has a lot of practical values. But what really, really sold me, mostly while I was at Purestake rather than like while I was making my decision, is this really obvious value to me of having the ability to basically serve multiple markets with one application. And I say it that way because you think of like even iOS and Android today, right? If you want an application, Clubhouse is a great example. You want to build an application, you start with one. You start with iOS usually if you're a US based company. And so Android may be bigger. Android has a more diverse market abroad.
Right.
And even in the US, like kind of demographically, it has a more kind of diverse market. But most people start with iOS because it's way easier. And so we find that Solidity is easier because it's very well documented. People at Ethereum who are enthusiastic about Ethereum have been creating teaching resources, have been putting together sample code repositories, have been doing a lot of things that are really important to supporting new developers as they enter the space. And so, let's not create this dynamic where you need to learn Ink in order to launch to a second marketplace, which is Polkadot, as you do on Android, for example. Let's make this world where you can use the applications you have in their current form, whether it be Solidity or another kind of compatible smart contract language. Let's just use what we have to be able to access that market. And so for me, even if you don't have a clue about the technology, if you look at Ethereum and you look at Polkadot and you think there's value to being able to serve both of those markets, then like Moonbeam is the obvious choice. And we do it better than anyone else. And like, I, of course, can speak all day about what we're doing because I'm really passionate. And there's like no other parachain who remotely measured up, in my opinion, of course. And so I think that piece, if you can understand like big market, wouldn't it be great to be able to access both of them without a lot of complexity? If you can understand that, then you can understand what the innovation is that kind of excites us and moves us forward. So it's less about the technology that underlies it, which is like EVM compatibility and all this cool stuff that we've done with account compatibility. And if you have an address on Moonbeam, it's using the same format as it does on Ethereum, which is a 0x thing that you've probably seen. That stuff's all really cool. But most marketers, most ecosystem developers, most people in kind of the business space aren't going to fall in love with EVM compatibility. They're going to fall in love with the opportunity of being able to serve multiple markets with one technology, which I think is the value that we bring. Which I clearly am excited about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So based on, like I said, I did have a discussion with Jordy. Thanks for that connection.
Yeah.
And so based on what you all are doing, how is this one in your opinion? What's the future of all of this? And two, how how do you think this is applicable to higher education? What do students need to learn?
This is interesting. So higher education, I think, is always looking ahead. And this is one of the places where it feels like it's playing catch up a little bit. And I feel like I've even
Without a doubt, without a doubt.
right? Like it seems like it's I've seen a lot of articles that talked about specifically the internet revolution in the 90s. And I mean, it really started before that, and how so much of it was rooted in academia. And today it's much less so. And I don't know if it's just the stigma of like crypto and the, get rich quick schemes, or if it's something else. But I would say the future for me, I very much to subscribe to the belief of our CEO. So I can't claim that this originates from me, but as a team, as an organization, we really think that the reason that this multi-chain thing that we talk about so much, the reason that that's going to work and that's going to be the future is because like this whole like one technology for many different use cases thing doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, right? We see multiple chains because we see lots of things happening on blockchain, and you need these specialized use cases to be able to service them. And so even today, if you look at Kusama versus Polkadot, where Kusama has been launched for, I guess, a year and a half, and Polkadot's been out for just under a year, they've already started to have different sorts of things happen, right? NFTs are much stronger on Kusama than they are on Polkadot. And Kusama is going to get all of these parachains first, and that's probably going to continue to change the dynamics. So what we see happening is not only will there be lots and lots of chains, probably a few bigger ones, but probably a bunch of smaller ones too, but there will be different specialization that develops. So Moonbeam has already sort of proven itself to be kind of a DeFi champion. We've got tons of DeFi apps building on us. We also have some really interesting NFT applications starting to develop, including an NFT bridge. And so you look at that and you think, well, wow, there's going to be a lot of liquidity on Moonbeam right away. And there's going to be a lot of users on Moonbeam right away. And so maybe in the future, there's more than one Moonbeam, right? Maybe there's one Moonbeam that is a little bit more customized for DeFi and maybe a little bit more customized for NFTs. And I think that could be true with any of these blockchains, right? To have kind of this home where you can 100% customize it to your own liking. And maybe it isn't multiple Moonbeams. Maybe instead it's, people use Moonbeam to come into the ecosystem because it's the best way to get in. And then they decide to launch their own parachain, or they decide to launch their own parathread so they can customize that entirely to exactly what they're doing. Those things I think are super possible, and not just in the Polkadot ecosystem, like across the board. But what's interesting about Polkadot that is not present in Ethereum is, the technical term is heterogeneous sharding. But what that actually means is, like, on Ethereum, all the things that will connect to it, which they call shards, are going to be the same structure, same format. On Polkadot, they're different. And so Moonbeam, again, totally customized to this, like, let's make it easy for applications that already exist to bring their use case to us. Let's make it easy for applications that wanted to deploy to Ethereum, but maybe couldn't for cost or scalability reasons. They can develop, or they can deploy to Moonbeam easily. And that's different than what Darwinia is doing and what like Plasm and Fala and all of those guys are doing. They all have their own chains. And that I think is really powerful. So that's where we get to see, I think, even directly in the Polkadot ecosystem, specialization really transforming what each of these blockchains is capable of doing and the use cases that they serve and the projects that they serve. To jump back to, I think the second part of your question was like, what's the future of multi-chain, and then, or sorry, what's the future of this space, and then higher education and how that plays into it. I see a lot of the same things happening in higher education that I saw in security, which I know I had mentioned to you guys last time we spoke. But there's no like way to learn blockchain in a way that's reasonable. And really, it shouldn't be necessarily approached in the same way as, like, think about, how do you take a class on the internet? You know what I mean? Like, there's different
It's that experiential learning type approach, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna have people from different skill levels, different knowledge levels, but they'll be in the same class, right? So you have to learn together. That's our approach to it.
Well, so let's take marketing for an example, since that's my discipline. So I learned how the internet works at a very, very high level in a web development class. It was Web Development 101. The term Web 2 was new at that time. And I didn't learn anything other than HTML and CSS, no JavaScript, nothing fancy. But I learned how to have a local file on my computer and how to transfer that to a server so that then it could be viewed at a URL. And so that sort of thing was taught to me in a practical use case, which is, you are a marketer, you will need to have some sort of digital property in the future. Let's learn how to do that. So if you think again to blockchain, I don't see marketers sitting down and taking a blockchain 101 course, but what I could see them doing is promotional campaigns using NFTs. So for example, we have recently had this NFT that was sold sort of using our branding by the Bondly team. We have to affiliate benefits with that, right? So people bought this thing, what do they get from it? And so we're working to figure out what the right thing to do is from a sale perspective, because we do have this token sale. And so people want some sort of access. We just need to determine what is safe and fair to give them. But also, you think about like exclusive swag, right? Like, we're looking into developing like custom limited edition things that can be given away as part of this NFT. And that kind of naturally begs the question of, well, what else can we do with this? Like, how can we support artists by commissioning these pieces of art that can then be sold, and maybe they keep all the profit, but we have some input from a branding perspective. And so that is a way to, again, get our message out there and also support, maybe an up and coming NFT artist who doesn't have the exposure or the awareness yet to kind of build their own. Mm. And then even I give the example often of Unisocks.
Yeah, Unisock, that's crazy.
So, you look at Unisocks where these things are trading at $70,000.
Yeah, you own the right. You just have the right. You can cash out at any time,
Yeah, but then if you cash out, what do you get? $5 pair of socks. And that's
exactly.
it. And so the cachet of owning the NFT actually has more value than the thing you could cash it in for.
Right, right.
And it becomes difficult to navigate because, again, from like a marketing perspective, I have no interest in earning money off of these things. But I do want to, build buzz, build hype, build excitement for what we're doing. And so trying to find ways to use these same mechanisms, but maybe, direct any sort of profits or funding toward an artist or toward, a company that's building out some of this stuff so that we aren't, so much involved in that piece. I think that's really interesting. And so from a higher education perspective, like if I had the opportunity to learn about this stuff, maybe in like, I took a promotions class in school, to learn about that as a resource would be really interesting. And that's not something that I see happening today. And so the integration of blockchain as a topic and as a concept, to me, needs to not just be kind of isolated to these technology focused courses or to these financial
Right.
oriented courses.
That's
But
where it
really
is right now. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yes, that's where it is right now. And like I said, we're trying to bring in the technology people with the business people so they can collaborate, they can work together, and then they can build out these solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're working on. We're trying to develop a test net, for students to just play. Because we say Kusama's not it's not a place for newbies.
Yeah.
So we're trying to create like a because you're gonna get something out there that's gonna be mind blowing, right? So we're just gonna see, we're gonna give them all the training that they need on Rust, on like I said, on Rust, on Solidity. See, I got it. Hopefully, I mean, we're gonna try to get all kinds of people from the Polkadot, or from the Polkadot ecosystem. Hopefully, we can get some of you all to come in and speak with these people, because that's who they're gonna listen to.
Yeah.
They're going to see me all the time, right? I'm nobody special to them. I'm nobody special to begin with, but whenever you get in the founders of these organizations, if we get people from Akala to come in, if we get people from Web3 to come in, that's what's going to bring up the buzz. And like I said, we got, I think, 8 schools now. We got 6 more from the UK that's trying to get approval from from the administration and things like that. So this thing's exploding quickly
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
within the higher education space, because like I said, I always say the higher education system is broken, and I think that if you kind of bring in that hands-on training, and you provide all of this content for free, then that's how you're going to get people excited. And then I was a junior whenever Facebook hit campus,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I kind of related to that, yes, but at a much smaller scale, yes, but it was word of mouth. I went to North Carolina
Yeah.
A&T, and like people from NC State was calling us and texting us, back whenever we had it, back before iPhone days, right? People were calling us to like, Goldie, go check out this Facebook.com thing. Then everybody was on it. Like 2 days later, everybody in Computer Lab was on it. So like I said, it's not going to be like that, but that's going to be my vision. Where yes, if I get 2 or 3 law students to start spreading the word, if I get 2 or 3 healthcare students to start spreading the word, now we're getting use cases from every single industry getting built out,
Mm-hmm.
by students. And
Yeah.
like I said, you're going to have a number of things, a number of amazing things that are going to hit, in my opinion. I
Yeah.
know it's a totally different approach than what other people are doing, but we're just trying to build up the ecosystem. That's all we're trying to do.
Well, I think having any approach at this stage is already a step ahead.
Yeah. Anything is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything is good. So yeah, I mean, that's what, like I said, I try. That's what we're trying to do. Like I said, whenever you said that, that self-awareness, I put down, transparency and vulnerability, and that's kind of what that's. So is that safe to say that was one of the reasons why you came to Purestake, why you went to Purestake?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I asked questions, and if they didn't have an answer yet, they were very frank about it. And they had a plan for how they were going to get to the answer, but they didn't know what it would be. And I
yeah,
think that's really different than how the business world trains you to be, right? Like you need to
yeah,
have a business plan and know
yeah, yeah,
exactly what
yeah,
you're doing at the outset. But as anyone knows who is in the startup space, like pivots are frequent.
yeah,
And so being actively on the hunt for, I think, an opportunity in a space that changes so rapidly just put us in a good position to see an opportunity and quickly start acting on it. When, if we had an idea of what it might be at the outset, we might have spent 6, 8, 10 months burning burning time and effort and resources trying to make that happen. When in reality, we could have been totally blind to a different opportunity.
yeah. Yeah, because that's why, I mean, that's because assume he's brilliant. I mean, he's a developer. He kicks out stuff all the time. He's absolutely nuts. But but yeah, I mean, I think we meet, we kind of gel together well, right? He's like the tech, we're both like bulldogs. So like we listen to each other, but we do butt heads, but we always come to a middle ground and to an agreement, right? That's why I
Yeah.
think that's why we get along together so well. But we both say we don't know what the hell but who does right now in this space? Who does?
Right.
Right? That's the thing. But I think that if you go in with the mindset, like you said, if you know that you're gonna shift and pivot, and those things are gonna be frequent, I think you're gonna be in a good space. And I think that my approach, I mean, this is my approach in the industry, where whenever I deliver something, I want to send it out to as many people as possible. I want to say, shoot holes in this. I say, you're doing me no good if you tell me this stuff is good. I might
Yep.
as well not send it to you, right?
hmm
So that's what I'm trying to get it within the network, start try to send this stuff out. Like I said, it's you all are going to be invaluable to me because you've been through it, right?
hmm
Ray Lou from Bit Country, I sent it to him, and I already told Ray, I say, you need to shoot the shit out of this, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's where I'm at. And like I told Ray, let me know how I can help you in any way. If you send me, like, ping me on LinkedIn and say, hey Justin, share this. Done.
hmm
You know.
Cool.
So I just, like I said, I just did the SidTech company page on LinkedIn. So my plan, I'm a terrible marketer. I'll tell you right there, I'll tell you first and foremost, I'm like awful at that. But I mean, my plan is to put up, some kind of blockchain type posting at least 2 or 3 times. Well, it's gonna be like one time. If I do one time a day, I'm doing good.
Yeah.
So 2 or 3 times a day, that's going to be good. But everything's going to be centered around blockchain from that company site that I'm going to reshare it on my webpage. The Facebook is up. Like I said, I don't know how I deal with that stuff. I deal with LinkedIn. That's pretty much extending my stuff. So
It's I mean, so much of what happens in this industry isn't on traditional social media anyway. Like we don't even
yeah, it's
have,
on Discord and all that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, it's Discord, Telegram, to some degree LinkedIn, but yeah,
So
we
you're
don't.
saying LinkedIn's kind of a waste of time, or LinkedIn would be good for the masses to like kind of get the name out?
So LinkedIn, I think for you, it will make a lot of sense because again, you're trying to win the hearts and minds of these like business curmudgeons who are not open
Right.
to blockchain. And so I think it will be an excellent vehicle for you. For us, we're pretty focused on developers. And yes, we do want to get the word out. And so like we do have a more general audience on Twitter, for example. But our Discord is really tech focused. And so we try to have different platforms that serve different audiences so that like, yes, we can continue to build awareness and bring some visibility to what Moonbeam is doing and what we believe is a significant opportunity. But we also, from the beginning, we've always prioritized integrations, which is why, we're able to launch with lots of stuff already building on us when many other chains aren't able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Let me see. Let me go through my notes one more time, make sure I don't miss anything. Like, doggone it, how did I miss that? Crypto winner, I love that. I'm gonna hit that one up.
I
Is that your
definitely did
term? Is
not
that your
make that.
term, or that's just? Did you make that up?
I did not.
Okay,
I think I've heard it many, many, many times, but I
I've
do
never
not
heard of that
actually
one.
know
I
who
like
did
that.
make it up. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, electric capital report. Please send that
Oh yeah.
when you get a chance. Um, Anything else on the regulations?
I mean, honestly, I think like there's probably people who know a lot more about it who could
Okay.
speak to it. I know I've listened to several podcasts, which is where a lot of my knowledge comes from, but because again, like marketing, not super close to the regulatory stuff, I just know that it's something that we have to be aware of, and it's something we're actively incentivized to make sure we do correctly. But it's complicated, and of course, having multiple teams of lawyers is also very expensive. Um,
Yes. How many lawyers do y'all have?
I honestly don't even know. We have
Oh.
at least two
I
firms.
don't even know. Damn.
Yeah, there's, and I mean, part of it. So like this one firm in Singapore works with the Moonbeam Foundation since they're based there, and the foundation kind of passes their advice to us as well, and vice versa. So we have our own team of lawyers here. I think it's Goodwin. I'm pretty sure it's Goodwin. And then I think we may even have some other lawyers as well in an advisory capacity, but it's not even just individuals, it's like teams of people trying to, for example, in the Singapore case, so the Moonbeam Foundation is based in Singapore and is going to be running this crowd loan for us. But the word loan implies an actual loan, which has a whole other set of regulations, which is not actually what it is. Because if you participate in a crowd loan, the projects themselves don't get the funding, right? It goes into like this third party account, which then bids on your behalf. So like, there's no way that we as a parachain could take your money, access it in any way, which is good, right? You want that security. But when you have the word loan, it implies that you're giving it to us and we're giving it back with some sort of interest. And so that sort of thing is one of the things that the Moonbeam Foundation has to navigate. And that's part of the reason, like, people are frustrated, of course, that we haven't announced our public sale or announced our crowd loan, but that's part of what the Moonbeam Foundation is working toward, is getting definition on how to navigate those things so that they can, make sure they're running it kind of up to snuff.
All right. Yeah, I know we talked about some kind of investment last time. So you said you're not looking for investors like for the Glimmer and all this other stuff. I know we briefly mentioned that.
So we already did we haven't done any sales for River. We already did our private rounds in the form of a strategic round and a seed round last year for Glimmer. There will be a crowd loan, which is for Moon River on Kusama, and there will also be a public sale for Moonbeam Network on Polkadot. So there will be other investment rounds. We just don't have anything open right now from a private perspective.
Okay. Please let me know.
Yeah.
Is there?
We are very aware that everyone is very eager for more details.
Right.
I sent you the Electric Capital report on LinkedIn, just so
Perfect.
when we close
Thank
this
you.
conversation, you still have it.
Say again?
I sent the Electric Capital report on LinkedIn as a message.
Yes, I have it. Oh, Medium. All right, on Medium. Perfect.
Yeah, I think it's a PDF you can download, but that was, I just looked in my history to see what I had.
Okay. Yeah, I got it. Excellent.
Oh, wait, this is an old one. Let me find the new one. Sorry. Just kidding. This is 2019. I wonder if I can just send documents. Oh, there it is.
You can put attachments on LinkedIn.
Capital developer report. It just came out in 2021, so that's why I know I sent you the wrong one.
Republic. What the hell? 13.
Oh, it is a 2021. Okay. I just uploaded it directly because I have it on my hard drive.
Okay, perfect.
Enter to send.
There it is. Got it.
Cool. So yeah, that one is really interesting. And even I think the reason I have the 2019 one in my search history, which is where I got that link, is because it's just amazing to see how much progress Polkadot has made in a year. So it still might be interesting to compare the two. But yeah, for us, it was really a validation point that we're in the right space.
Yeah, excellent. All right, give me a second. Let me go with my Polkadot. Get my Polkadot folder. Got it. This Polkadot folder is building up very quickly.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I'm pretty sure you have a pretty large Polkadot folder as well.
Well, my whole hard drive, really.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. So yeah, I mean that was all the questions that I had.
Okay.
This is going to be, like I said, I'm going to download this, get the transcript, and I'm going to start working on it. I'm not the greatest writer, but I have the audience, and I think people are, like, from an academic perspective, people are going to be all over
Yeah.
any kind of journal article, especially empirical experience, because most, I would say 80% of those blockchain articles are just theory. I don't
That's
even know if there's very few case studies.
I think that's where this starts to get interesting, right? Is I hope that what we're seeing is a tide shift away from theoretical and into real life. And that's what, that's what business people are all about. Like there are, a few Steve Jobses of the world who can see the potential of something very, very far away. But I think for most of us, it takes a little bit of, I think they're onto something. This seems really interesting in order to like
Right.
focus. So that's where, again, like to go back to this crypto rabbit hole, I've yet to fall down the rabbit hole just from a pure technology perspective, but I have 100% fallen down the rabbit hole from like loving what this can do for the industry as a blockchain industry, but also just for, again, like for marketers, for people in finance professions, for people who are working to develop communities that are engaging. Like there's things that people are doing in the space that are far away and above what other people are doing
Right.
in the Web2 space.
And the thing is, to be honest, I don't think anyone within higher, all right, let me back up. Not unless you're at Berkeley or MIT, nobody in the higher education space has this type of access, to be honest. Right?
I don't think so. Like MIT, I know Algorand, their founder is an MIT grad, and he did a lot of, again, technology research. But yeah, I don't think a lot of universities are really focusing on like blockchain as a real business concept and vehicle for future
Yeah.
innovation.
This is gonna be huge. This is gonna be huge. And like I said, I mean, I'm gonna try to kick these things out, and build up this ecosystem. And hey, this is a sharing economy, and we're sharing this knowledge, getting things out there, because within this network, I mean, we're dependent upon each other for the success of Polkadot,
Mm-hmm.
So we all have skin in the game.
Yep.
We're just hitting it from different angles. I'm trying to develop my stable of unicorns, so I can send you all some over. That's my plan.
That sounds great. I'd love to hear how you do that.
But I'm telling you, I was talking to Asun, like these students in the US, they don't want to work. They don't put the work in like the students in the UK and the students in India. I just had a call with a student in India this morning. She's actually she does a lot of deep learning. She's a deep learning developer. So I got her. I spoke with her about 30 minutes. I'm trying to get her in the substrate. I'm trying to get her in the substrate program. If you know how to get into that, please let me know. I'm trying to get her in it. And I'm trying to get her on Rust. So I put a message on Discord. But I hadn't checked it since I sent it.
Okay.
I know I spoke with one person from I think he's from Malaysia. He's actually an anesthesiologist, and he's actually going. He said it starts in May. So yeah, I hadn't seen anything posted about it. So yeah, if you know anybody who can send me some information, I want to get her in that course.
Okay. I should be able to get some info because I think we're one of the sponsors.
Okay. How much is it?
I don't think it's paid. I don't think.
Oh, okay. If it is, I don't care.
I would have to check.
Oh,
But
if it is, I don't care. I just want to get her in it.
yeah. Okay.
And if you have, yeah, there's some more people, but I just don't think they have time for it.
Yeah.
But she has time, so I'll get her in it. Yeah, but moving forward, like I said, I'm gonna try to get as many students in there as possible. I don't care what. I mean, I don't. Do you like when they start charging? Do you have an idea of how much you're gonna charge for it?
I think it's a community development program, so I don't think they want to charge for it. But
Okay, fair enough. Okay. But yeah, I'm trying to get people in that, like my technical people. I want to get them in that program. But if I have any concern that they don't have time, I'm not even gonna bother. I think she'll be able to do it.
okay, I'll see if I can get more information on that.
Okay.
Did she already apply? Do you know? Oh, there is a fee. Okay.
How much is it?
It says $492 US.
All right, that's fine.
But I'll double check anyway to see.
Well, I mean, there's scholarships out there, right?
I thought that's why we were sponsoring. Yeah, I'll have to double check. I don't have the latest information, so I would just be
I think I heard there were scholarships.
to help you.
Either way, yeah, I prefer scholarship. I want to get her in it.
Okay.
All right. I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And I'm like I said, I'm very excited about this. I'm gonna probably get on this on Monday. I got a lot of grading to do, but I think I'm gonna try to get this done as quickly as possible because, yeah, I don't think there's many studies out there. I don't think there's many case studies out there on blockchain, and this is gonna put this is gonna put Moonbeam and put Polkadot on the map.
I hope so. I mean, again, I think it's the right time. If people just
It's
start
the
to
right
learn
time because it's hot. It's
Yeah.
hot. You need to catch it when it's hot. Strike when the iron's hot. Ain't that how it goes?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you do that, especially in higher education. And then we're trying to start this, this training platform within higher education. And then, we're building up this funnel of people, and all they're going to know is Polkadot.
I hope so. I think that's a good bet to make, but.
Well,
Yeah,
because
let me know if you have-
so somebody explained it to me where, years ago, back in the 90s, when Apple was giving away all these computers, to all these institutions, once those students left, all they knew was Apple, right? So once they went into the industry, what do you think they're going to buy? Apple computers, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same. So like I said, in business, when I'm supply chain, SAP trains all these students on HANA, right? HANA is a multi-million-dollar platform. So you have to be in a large or like a multi-million-dollar or a billion-dollar organization to run HANA.
Yep.
So all these students who go to the small and medium businesses, oh, you don't run HANA? No. It costs money. We don't our annual revenue will not cover the cost of HANA.
Yeah.
But that's all they know when they graduate from Penn State, for example.
Yep.
Because SAP got in there.
Yeah, we have
That's what I'm
similar
trying to do.
things from a market research perspective, like tools that I would never be able to afford as a startup. I don't even remember the names of them anymore because I haven't used them in 10 years, but we had similar things. Like we learned technology that is for big consumer brands and not for startups.
Right. Yeah. So, and again, I mean, that's why, because I teach at University of Cumberland in the master's program. I think I mentioned that, and we have people learning Hyperledger Fabric. Those students aren't going to be dealing with Hyperledger Fabric.
No.
Right. So their master's thesis, I got them working on Polkadot. I got them doing their first paper they had to read was Gavin's white paper. It's the first thing they had to do. So their whole senior thesis is centered around Polkadot and the interoperability of Polkadot. So I actually have a look at their draft. So their draft was due last week. I'm gonna have to look at those to see what work they've done, because I think I might get one that may be publish worthy, but we'll see.
Okay. Well, let me know if I can help, and if you have any other questions.
Yep. So yeah, like I said, I'm gonna try to get that. I really appreciate it. And yeah, please keep me in the loop and let me know if you find anything out about that training.
Yep, I'll look into it.
All right, I appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, enjoy your weekend.
All right, you as well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.